Hello, good afternoon. My name is David Winch. I'm a forensic accountant with Bartfield's Forensic Accountants. And in this session, we're dealing with what I regard as a fairly straightforward topic, which is confiscation and changes in the value of money. Perhaps I regard it as a straightforward topic because I'm an accountant and I'm used to fiddling about with numbers and adjusting figures for inflation and so on and so on. Solicitors and barristers don't always regard this as a straightforward topic. So we will try and deal with it fairly simply and straightforwardly. So the topic is confiscation and changes in the value of money. And we will cover the reason for what I have referred to as the uplift, and I'll explain as I go along how perhaps that's the wrong term. Talk about the CPIH inflation index, how to calculate the uplift, and when to apply the uplift. And finally, we will round off as usual with a little bit about how Bartfield's Forensic Accountants can help you. So the reason for an uplift. Suppose I am taking on a new employee and I decide to offer him a salary, but instead of fixing that in terms of pounds, I'm going to say to this new guy, John, I'm going to pay you a constant value of remuneration, a constant value of salary. So I want to fix it in terms of value. How can I do that? Well, I could say, right, John, I'm going to pay you each month the equivalent of the value of 2,000 Tesco wholemeal 800-gram sliced loaves. You might wonder why I would do that, but well, why not? Why not pay him the equivalent each month of 2,000 Tesco wholemeal 800-gram sliced loaves? What I need to do is go to Tesco, don't I, and find out how much in pounds they are. Well, I did check recently and they were priced at £1.10 each. So in terms of money, how much am I going to pay John? Well, currently his salary is going to be 2,000 times £1.10. So that is £2,200 per month. That's what I'm paying him now. But what if the price changes to £1.15? Well, if I'm going to continue to maintain the value of what I'm paying him in terms of Tesco 800-gram wholemeal sliced loaves, then if they're now £1.15, I would have to pay him 2,000 times £1.15. That's £2,300 per month. So that change from £2,200 a month to £2,300 a month is not really a pay increase, is it? Because I'm just maintaining the value of the amount that I pay him. However, you're going to say, well, that's a pretty crazy way of doing things. Because what happens if Tesco have an offer on their wholemeal 800-gram sliced loaves and start selling them for 80p? I'd have to cut his salary down, wouldn't I? So it's a very crude and simplistic method that I've suggested there of paying John a constant value of remuneration. There has to be a better way to maintain the value of what I pay him. And of course there is. So instead of just looking at the price of those 800-gram wholemeal sliced loaves at Tesco, I could use a recognized inflation index. And the place to go for that, of course, is the Office for National Statistics. The CPIH index is based on consumer prices, including, no doubt, the price of a loaf of bread, but it's also based on housing costs, So there's an element for rents or mortgage interest or whatever it is, which is a little bit more difficult for me to measure. And it's all weighted for the average consumer, whatever that may mean. It's published monthly, and in practice, the CPIH is the index which is now used by courts for maintaining the value of assets over time in confiscation proceedings. A while back, we used a different index called the Retail Prices Index, or RPI, and then there was, for a short time, a different one called RPIJ, which recognized that there were some particular problems with the RPI index. But everybody is, I think, now settled on CPIH as being the index to recognize changing prices. Now, of course, in confiscation, we're actually talking about maintaining the value of assets. And you might think, well, why are we using a consumer prices index, a shopping index, a loaves of bread and fish and whatever else index? But that is the one we use. The CPIH index is based on an average across 2015, the year 2015, and that is called 100.0. So we say we're going to fix our 100.0 as the average of what prices were in 2015. And because prices generally rise over time, that means that if we're looking at an index dated prior to 2015, it's likely to be a figure of less than 100. And if we look at one after 2015, it's likely to be an index of more than 100, which is just confirming to us that generally prices rise. Generally, we have inflation of prices rather than deflation. And over the past few years, inflation has been relatively subdued. I remember a lot of years ago when we were looking at inflation rates of 10% per annum. Now we're looking at inflation rates of 1 or 2% per annum. The CPIH index is published to 1 decimal place. So as you see, I've called it 100.0 there. And the latest figure, which is published, which is the one for April 2021, is actually 110.4. That's the ONS latest published figure for this index. It's very easy on the internet to find a table of the CPIH index figures for each month going back over the years. And the figure being 110.4, we can see from that it's telling us that, roughly speaking, between 2015 and now, prices have increased by about 10% over a period of 6 years. So as I said, sort of 1 or 2% per annum on average. Okay, how do we calculate an uplift? I remember being in the Crown Court not so long ago, and counsel stood up and said to the judge, Your Honour, I have the expert here, Mr. Winch, who has calculated the CPIH uplift for us. And the judge said, we don't need an expert. My lad at school could do that. We don't need an expert witness. Just give us the figures. And in a sense, of course, he's right. This is not difficult. But let's do a couple of examples just to demonstrate. Suppose a defendant has obtained £10,000. Let's have a nice, easy figure. £10,000 on, let's say, the 8th of February 2017. What is the equivalent value today? Well, first of all, because the CPIH is published monthly, it actually doesn't matter when in February 2017 he acquired that. It will be the same whenever in February 2017. From the Office for National Statistics website, we can see that the CPIH figure for February 2017 was 102.4. as I said, published to 1 decimal place. And as I mentioned just now, the latest CPIH from April 2021 is 110.4. So how do we restate the £10,000, the constant maintained value of what £10,000 was worth in February 2017 to what number of pounds has the equivalent value today? It's a simple calculation. We take the amount that we are looking at, £10,000, we multiply it by today's CPIH, the latest CPIH that we have of 110.4, and we divide it by the CPIH that applied in the month in which it was obtained. And that gives us a figure, which we can see on the slide, of £10,781 and some pence. And it's that easy. It's just a very simple sum. Now, obviously, if you've got a lot of these to do, then it's helpful to use something like Excel to calculate them all pretty rapidly. Let's just take another example to ram this home. Suppose a defendant obtained £20,000 rather long ago on the 17th of October 2012. What is the equivalent value of that today? Well, again, we look at the CPIH for that time. The CPIH for October 2012 was 96.8. The latest CPIH we know, April 21, is 110.4. And so we can do the calculation. We take the £20,000 that we're looking at, we multiply it by the latest CPIH, 110.4, we divide it by the CPIH from the time that we are looking at, which is October 2012, which was 96.8, and we come to a figure of £22,809 and some pence. Again, fairly straightforward, and logically, we mentioned, didn't we, that since 2015, there'd been about 10% increase in prices. We're going back here to 2012, so we would expect a bit more than 10% increase in our £20,000. And indeed, that's what we see. The £20,000 is now restated as £22,809 and some pence. And here, as I say, although I've called it an uplift, it isn't really an uplift at all, is it? It's a maintenance. What we're saying is that if we maintain the value that £20,000 had in October 2012, we would need £22,809 today. When do we apply an uplift? Well, I'm talking about confiscation, of course, and in confiscation, we apply an uplift when we are considering the sterling value today of an amount relating to a time that has passed, an earlier time. So the most common application we see is where a defendant has obtained property which needs to be valued in relation to his benefit. So if we've got particular criminal conduct where a defendant has obtained a lump of money or an asset some years ago, and we know the date he obtained it and we know the value of it at that time, then we need to look at the value of it today in sterling. And so we need to do this CPIH computation. Now, in practice, prosecutors will not always do the CPIH computation. And from a defendant's point of view, if the prosecutor does not do the CPIH computation, then fine, just take it, because the defendant is certainly not suffering as a result of the prosecution failing to do the uplift computation. You're just going to accept it. And in practice, we often see on Section 16 statements that the uplift is not applied to maybe not applied to particular criminal benefit, maybe not applied to assumed criminal benefit. Because if you are looking at a string of deposits into a bank account, which are going to be assumed benefit under criminal lifestyle provisions over a period of years, then of course the computation changes month by month as the CPIH changes. And indeed, the computation will change again, won't it? If you have a Section 16 statement issued now, and then a new Section 16 statement comes out in 6 months' time after a bit of turning and throwing, the uplift has to be recalculated because today's CPIH is now going to be different from what it was then. So you may find that the prosecutor simply doesn't bother with that. And from a defendant's point of view, fine. But certainly in terms of, does the legislation provide that that should be done? Yes, it does. And similarly, in relation to tainted gifts, when you're looking at the value of a tainted gift, one of the computations you do is you look at the value at the time the gift was made and you uplift that for changes in the value of money since then. So you do exactly the same sort of CPIH computation. You might then compare that with the current value of an asset. So for example, if there's been a tainted gift of a house, you look at the value of the house at the time the gift was made, you uplift that for CPIH, you also look at the value of that house today, and then from a tainted gift perspective, you select the higher one. That's what the legislation requires you to do. A little bit more controversial, there's a £5,000 limit in relation to criminal lifestyle in Section 75. In that for certain of the criminal lifestyle tests, and you will know that there are 4 different routes to a criminal lifestyle, but for certain of those routes, the question is asked, has the benefit obtained been at least £5,000 or more? Well, again, when you're asking that question, the court is asking that question today when it's making the confiscation order. Today is what's called the material time, and therefore the court has to look at that today, having taken account of changes in the value of money. So it might be that at the time, 3 or 4 years ago possibly, the defendant obtained a particular benefit of £4,900, let's say. Let's say he stole £4,900 from somebody. Is that at least £5,000? Well, arguably, in answering that question, you need to uplift the £4,900 for changes in the value of money, because you're asking, is the value of that stolen amount today at least £5,000? So you can do a CPIH uplift there. Now, I suspect that not everybody would agree with me on that. Some people will say, no, hang on, it is what it is. If it was £4,900 when he got it, then it's not £5,000. Well, that's a legal point, and I don't think there's been any court decisions on it. Maybe one day there will be. And also, where the court is asked to vary an existing confiscation order, either under Section 21, under Section 21, you've got a variation in the amount of the benefit. And as you're probably aware, what Section 21 is dealing with is the situation where at the time the confiscation order was made, the prosecution did not have information, which they now have, which related to the benefit obtained by the defendant prior to that date when the confiscation order was made. And so in those circumstances, if the conditions are met, the prosecution can go back to the court and say, we want a reconsideration of the benefit calculation. We want the court to look again at the benefit that had been obtained by this defendant at the date the confiscation order was made, in the light of this new information, which we didn't have and we should have had, but we didn't have at the time, and it should have been before the court. It was not before the court. We are now bringing it before the court, and we want the court, as it were, to place itself back on the date when the confiscation order was made and consider again the benefit in the light of this additional information. So that's section 21. It doesn't happen a lot. There are all sorts of conditions applied to it, and we don't have time today to go into those. Section 22 is where the court is looking again at the defendant's available amount. And here, what the court is doing is looking at the defendant's available amount today and comparing that with the available amount that it found when it made the confiscation order, and seeing if there has been an increase in the defendant's available amount. Now, in seeing whether the defendant's available amount has increased between then and now, it needs to uplift the old figure to make it comparable with the new one, because what it's comparing is the value, not simply the pounds number, but the actual value. So it needs to uplift the value of the, it needs to maintain the value of the old available amount figure by uplifting the sterling figure for changes in the value of money. So that again is where you see an uplift being applied under confiscation law. And let's just quickly run through the statutory basis for those. Section 80 deals with the value of property obtained from conduct. Section 8, obviously we're talking about Proceeds of Crime Act 2002 throughout here. And in particular, section 80, subsection 2A deals with changes in the value of money. Section 81 deals with the value of tainted gifts. And here we're looking particularly at subsection 81(1)(a). Section 21, which is where I mentioned that an order has been made and the benefit is being reconsidered. Then we've got to look at subsection 11 of section 21 to find the reference to changes in the value of money. And in section 22, where we're reconsidering the defendant's available amount, then subsection 7 of section 22 makes the reference to comparing two figures and taking account of changes in the value of money when making those comparisons. Okay, so that is CPAIH covered fairly swiftly. Just a reminder that Bartfield's Forensic Accountants is fully staffed. We undertake legal aid and privately funded criminal and civil forensic accountancy work. Excuse me. We are pretty much now back in the office, but either way, it's easy for us to conduct the bulk of our work, whether remotely, working from home or whatever, using our up-to-date and secure IT facilities. Easy again to contact us by phone, by email, online. You will see on the final slide a phone number and an email address. If you have a specific query, it's probably better to contact me by email, because then I can give a full and considered response. Our website, of course, is full of useful information and is accessible 24/7. And in relation to this topic and other topics, there are blog articles in the news section, the Insights news section of the website on bartfieldsforensic.co.uk. And the recordings of this and previous webinars are in the seminars section of the website. We will send you a recording of this webinar. And as I've said, if you have questions, do come to me with them. The email address is there, and the phone number and the website address, of course. So thank you very much for your time. I hope this has been helpful to you on the topic of CPIH, and I will be back in a fortnight with a new topic. Thank you very much.